Mom, check my bag. I couldn't go on the school trip I was so excited about.
About 14 minutes after seeing my daughter, Emily, off to her school trip, she unexpectedly returned home and burst into tears, saying that shortly after I sent Emily off on her school trip, I received a call from her class teacher. Being told it was an emergency, I was startled, thinking something might have happened to Emily. About 5 minutes after I got off the phone with her teacher, just as the teacher had said, Emily came back home. The reason Emily came back home was something in her backpack. When I checked, I found that her brand new change of clothes and other items were wet and discolored. I found out that my mother-in-law, Mary, had gone to the school and done something. Not to complain, but my relationship with Mary is bad, and she even disliked Emily, so there's no way she would have gone to see her granddaughter off. I immediately called Mary, furiously demanding an explanation. Then Mary said that it wasn't fair for only Emily, one of her 2 granddaughters, to go on the school trip. She thought it would be too sad for the other granddaughter who couldn't go. Mary justified her actions as delivering justice to Emily, insisted she did nothing wrong, and abruptly hung up the phone. Unable to contain my anger, I reported the incident to a certain person. As a result, Mary ended up provoking the wrath of that individual, leading to her own downfall. I am a housewife in my 30s. I have a daughter with my husband, who is in the same age group as me. Emily, who turned into a 6th grader this year, has been looking forward to her school trip for quite a while. Since kindergarten, Emily has been practicing rhythmic gymnastics, and sometimes she demonstrates her skills as an example during gymnastics in her physical education class. Emily, who once appeared in the local newspaper for participating in a competition, has become somewhat of a local celebrity. Once a year, there is a showcase in physical education class where each student presents his or her own creative gymnastics routine. When the time for the showcase arrives, it's so popular that students from other classes also come to watch. Despite her popularity, Emily has never been overconfident or boastful about it. Whenever asked for help, she willingly spends time with her friends, offering advice and assistance until they are satisfied. I'm grateful she has grown up to be such a considerate person. My husband and I married for love, but since the beginning of our marriage, it's been a series of never-ending problems. The issues aren't with my husband, but rather because of Mary's behavior. She believes I stole her precious son and has been causing trouble for me because of it. Initially, Mary, in exchange for accepting our marriage, demanded that we live with her in the family home as a condition. My husband had moved out of his family home to live alone when he went to college, and I was in a similar situation. Therefore, we had decided not to live with either set of parents, but to live on our own instead. Of course, we agreed that if either of our parents ever needed care or assistance due to health or other reasons, we would discuss and address the situation then. Given our perspective, we communicated that we couldn't immediately agree to the matter of living together. We could have declined right away, but we were concerned about upsetting Mary and worsening our relationship with her. Then, my father-in-law, who was present at the time, spoke up, saying that it would be too harsh to expect the young couple to live with the in-laws. He proposed that it would be better to let us live alone for a few years, offering us a lifeline in the situation. Taking advantage of that, my husband skillfully convinced Mary, and at that time, the discussion of living together was dropped. After we got married, Mary kept bringing up the idea of us living together. Usually, if a parent-in-law wants to live together, he or she at least tries to be pleasant to his or her daughter-in-law, but she was the opposite.
You're young and a housewife. Must be nice. When I was your age, I worked part-time to help with the finances. I bet you keep the house immaculate. Then what's this mess?
She would come over when my husband was away, find faults in everything, and leave after criticizing. When my husband was out on overnight business trips, she would stay over, claiming it was too dangerous to go back at night, forcing me to endure her endless sarcasm. I developed mild neurosis due to her excessive interference. When my husband realized it was because of her, he confronted her firmly, assuring me we would never live together. Thanks to my husband and father-in-law, they kept her at a distance, and I started to recover. Soon after, I found out I was pregnant. I was anxious about her meddling again, but she was preoccupied with my sister-in-law, Kate, who was also pregnant at the same time, and showed no interest in me. She ignored my pregnancy and birth, favoring Kate and giving her grand gifts, while barely acknowledging ours. Years went by peacefully. Our daughter grew up to be strong, honest, and full of justice. Mary believed that our not living with her precious son was my doing, that I had brainwashed him. As our daughter grew and resembled me more than my husband, at family gatherings, Mary would cold shoulder her. In contrast, she adored my niece, who looked just like Kate as a child. She would give gifts to my niece for Christmas, but not to Emily. My father-in-law would secretly give one to Emily, but if he's caught doing so, she would snatch it away, saying,
I won't give anything to the child of the woman who stole my son.
When confronted by my husband or father-in-law in front of the kids, she dramatically claimed we were all ganging up on her. Emily gradually realized she was disliked by her grandmother. But she never became resentful. I'm so grateful for how well she's grown up. Just before Emily's preschool graduation, Kate got divorced and took custody of her daughter. The divorced Kate, along with my niece, moved in with my in-laws. My niece then ended up in the same school district and elementary school as Emily. They were in the same grade. My niece and Emily are in different classes, yet my niece often comes to see Emily. She frequently borrows school supplies and personal items that each student is supposed to have. I realized this because Emily's stationery was running out unusually fast. I initially suspected it might be bullying, with her things being hidden or thrown away, but it wasn't the case. Naturally, if two people share something, it runs out faster. I was relieved to learn it wasn't bullying, but I couldn't shake off this nagging feeling. I wondered if this was also a form of harassment from Kate. Mary didn't like me and Emily, often making our lives difficult with her constant nagging and harassment. Especially after Kate got divorced and moved back in with my in-laws, there were frequent incidents that seemed like she was contacting me just to make snide remarks.
How can someone as unimpressive as you be my brother's wife? You'll definitely be dumped eventually.
Kate seems to think highly of herself as a capable woman. Despite her own failed marriage, she would go out of her way to tell me that I too would inevitably be left by my husband. As irritating as it was, I tried to ignore her, thinking she was just envious of our seemingly happy family. However, the thought of her extending her spiteful behavior towards Emily was something I didn't want to consider. I told myself that I might be reading too much into it. This decision of mine would unexpectedly lead to consequences, but that was something to unfold a bit later. Time passed, and Emily became a 6th grader. In the 6th grade, there's a school trip. Emily had always been excited about it, especially each time she brought her savings for the trip to school. Now that she had reached the grade when the trip would finally happen, we frequently discussed where they might go in our conversations as a family. When it came to my own school days and my husband's, our daughter became curious about our school trip experiences as soon as the schedule and location were decided. Once our daughter brought home a note from school asking each family to prepare for the upcoming school trip, she and I began to prepare little by little. While she was excited and upbeat, I felt a bit worried. Recently, there had been an incident in her class, and the parents of the children involved were called in. Emily often remarked, "Why are the boys in my class so foolish?" showing her concern about the misbehavior of some rambunctious boys. By 6th grade, it's common for girls to start showing physical changes, and some more developed girls even start wearing training bras around 4th or 5th grade. Emily, being an active gymnast, had a muscular build, so her chest area wasn't particularly mature. However, the school trip guide for parents mentioned being cautious about underwear, as the trip involved several nights' stay and girls would be in separate rooms from boys. It also advised that girls not used to wearing bras should start getting accustomed to them. The guide also contained information about menstruation. These letters from school would inevitably be read by curious children. It seems that some mischievous boys reacted to the words period and bra and started teasing girls who were more physically developed or harassed them out of sheer curiosity. I had already talked to Emily about the changes her body would undergo as she grew older. Even before the school brought up the issue of underwear, her gymnastics club had discussed it, especially since gymnastics attire tends to be form-fitting, highlighting body lines. The club's discussions included care for girls as they approached puberty. So, I had already taught Emily about the individual differences in growth, and that it's wrong to tease others about their bodies. Emily, who has a strong sense of justice, defended the teased girls and called out the boys' bad behavior. One of the boys, whose father was a city council member, complained to his dad about a sassy girl standing up to the boys. This led to a major fuss at school, with the parents of the boys' friends demanding that the parents of the outspoken girls be called in. However, since there had already been issues with boys teasing physically developed girls, the parents' demands were not acknowledged. The parents of the teased girls even threatened to report the matter to the school board if it happened again, which led the school to adopt a stricter stance towards the boys and their parents. As a result, Emily became even more popular among the girls, seen as a brave and reliable ally. However, when out of their parents' sight, kids can sometimes commit acts that would put even adults to shame. I was really on edge about whether Emily would face any revenge from the boys' group she had a conflict with. Though the teachers, including the homeroom teacher, promised to keep an eye out, my worries didn't just disappear. Contrary to my anxiety, Emily seemed unconcerned, treating it as a thing of the past. We spread out the shopping for the field trip over several days. We couldn't do it on the days Emily had her rhythmic gymnastics classes. During one of these shopping trips, I unexpectedly ran into Kate. At first, I thought I could handle just Kate, but then Mary showed up from inside the store. They were shopping together, but Kate had left the store first out of boredom while Mary chatted with a salesperson. So I ran into Kate first, and shortly after, Mary joined us.
Good timing. I heard your daughter's a star in her rhythmic gymnastics class.
I don't want any favoritism towards my grandkids. Since your daughter attends that gymnastics club, I want both of my granddaughters to join.
But I'm a single mom, so naturally, you'll cover the fees.
She even demanded I do the driving. Why should I have to do all that? When I firmly refused, Mary accused Emily of bragging.
That cheeky daughter of yours must have bragged to her, who's in another class.
Don't look down on us just because I'm a single parent. Saying we can't afford extracurricular activities because we don't have a father figure belittles us.
I generally avoided any interaction with Mary and Kate. They demanded I pay the gymnastics fees and drive as compensation. Emily denied saying those things, but Mary yelled, "Children should not butt into conversations between adults." Emily, holding back her frustration, tightly gripped my hand. I couldn't let Emily endure this alone. I said we'd discuss it with my husband and decide. I trust Emily. She wouldn't say such things. I promised to speak with my niece to hear both sides. Announcing that we'd talk to my niece and make a decision, Mary and Kate seemed panicked at the prospect of my husband getting involved. Seizing the opportunity, we left. Once home, I hugged Emily. "I'm sorry for making you go through this," I repeated. She reassured me it wasn't my fault, but deep down, I knew my strained relationship with Mary was a factor. Even if it was caused by Mary's thoughtless words and actions. I briefed my husband when he got home. My husband informed my father-in-law about the situation, and it turned out that Mary and Kate, who were at their family home as well as his niece, were all concerned about what's happening. But I knew Mary and Kate wouldn't be easily deterred. Despite the difficulties, the day of the eagerly awaited school trip arrived. Despite checking everything the night before, I still asked Emily if she forgot anything. With a smile, Emily reassured me, "It's all good, Mom. We've checked everything together several times," and then she left the house with a light step. It's just about a 5-minute walk to the school. The kids were traveling by chartered bus, stopping at rest areas on the way. While doing household chores, I kept glancing at the clock, thinking, she must be boarding the bus by now, right? It's almost time for them to leave on schedule. I just couldn't help but worry. I was reminiscing about how, when I was Emily's age and went on my school trip, my mother must have felt the same way after sending me off, oblivious as I was, having fun with my friends. Just as I was lost in these thoughts, the house phone rang at an unusual time. Just 14 minutes after Emily left, I received an unexpected call from her teacher. When I was told something unexpected had happened, my heart raced, fearing Emily might have been in an accident. But as I listened to her teacher's relatively calm voice, I began to understand the situation. Emily had to come back home due to some circumstances. If I could quickly replace some items in her bag and drive her to a specified station, she could catch up with the chartered bus. After thanking the teacher for their thoughtful consideration and hanging up, I quickly found suitable replacements for the items she was supposed to take on the trip. As I was in the middle of changing clothes, Emily returned home, crying. I knew some of the details from the teacher, but seeing Emily's state was different from what I had been told. Just 14 minutes earlier, she had left the house looking bright and energetic. The only difference now was her tears instead of a smile. I asked her what happened, and she told me to look inside her backpack. When I checked, I found the interior slightly damp, though not enough to seep through to the exterior. The backpack, originally waterproof, had been further sprayed inside by my husband, anticipating any unforeseen events. Fortunately, only the inside of the backpack was wet, as the waterproofing held up, affecting only the items that weren't waterproof. Emily, crying, told me that Mary had come to see off her cousin and had poured juice into her backpack. Aware that her own grandmother didn't like her, Emily assumed she had come to see off her cousin, not her. So, engrossed in conversation with her friends from the same group, she didn't notice Mary standing behind her. It was her friend who was talking to her that noticed and said, "Hey, there's an unknown old lady touching your backpack." By the time she turned around, something had already been put in, and when she checked, she found the inside of her backpack was wet. Emily, understandably upset, confronted Mary, but she dismissed it as an accidental spill and left. I reassured Emily, telling her I would speak to Mary and encourage her to reset her mood and enjoy the school trip. I prepared a smaller backpack I normally use, filling it with substitutes for the original items and new spare clothes we had bought as reserves. Emily, regaining her spirits, helped me pack quickly, and we hurried to the car to drive to the designated station. We arrived before the bus, which had been caught in a bit of traffic. The bus made a special stop just for her, which we were grateful for. Emily boarded the bus, was greeted by her friends, and waved at me multiple times as she set off on the school trip. After watching the bus Emily was on disappear from view, I returned home, and before finishing up the remaining household chores, I called Mary to protest. I knew getting emotional would play into her hands, so I had to stay calm and composed while making my protest. Before picking up the receiver, I took several deep breaths. As I called her, Mary answered after a couple of rings. I calmly demanded an explanation for her actions with Emily's backpack.
She's one of my 2 granddaughters, and it just seemed so unfair for only one to go on the trip. I thought you wouldn't listen to anything I said, so I wet the items in her backpack to prevent her from going. Isn't it your lack of concern to blame here? Shouldn't you realize that?
What was this woman saying? That was my reaction upon hearing Mary's excuse. But as infuriating as it was, I knew calling her names would mean losing the argument. I tried to stay calm and counter her words. But then she abruptly ended the call, claiming she had to go out. I wasn't even aware that my niece couldn't go on the school trip. I generally avoided any interaction with Mary and Kate. How could I have known? Moreover, Emily hadn't mentioned anything about her cousin not being able to go. There was no information about any illness or injury, and even though my relationship with Kate wasn't good, if my niece had been sick or injured, my husband would have heard about it. My husband would have surely shared such information with me, at least for the sake of keeping me informed. The anger inside me was boiling, and just then my niece called. She confessed to feeling envious after seeing how excited Emily was about the trip. I generally avoided any interaction with Mary and Kate. However, she was told by her mother that she couldn't go because they hadn't made any payments for the trip. Mary, upon hearing this, decided that since my niece couldn't go, it would only be fair if Emily also had a painful experience. She had said this the night before, but my niece never thought she'd actually prevent her from going. My niece apologized to me. It turned out she didn't know they weren't making payments. Kate had told her that the trip was fully paid for and that she didn't have to worry about anything. So, my niece believed what she was told, but as the school trip drew near, she was confronted with the fact that no payment had been made. What a cruel thing for Kate to do. There were children in Emily's class who, for various reasons, couldn't attend the trip. When I was a child, there were also kids who didn't participate in school events due to illness or religious reasons. I had told Emily not to ask such children why they weren't going. I assume my niece's teacher, trying to be considerate, didn't pursue the unpaid fees for the school trip. If they had, my niece would have questioned it, and my father-in-law, who lives with them, would have noticed. I couldn't forgive Kate for imposing such a burden on her child. I had been avoiding them, but this time I couldn't just let it go. I decided to take action, not just for my niece, who had apologized to me, but also to give them a piece of my mind. I reassured my niece that it wasn't her fault and that this was an adult problem. That evening, when my husband came home from work, I explained everything that had happened. He immediately contacted my father-in-law, and we shared the whole story. My father-in-law, still working and in his late 50s, regretted not noticing the issue with the trip and apologized. He was quite shocked to learn that no payments had been made for the school trip. My husband was furious that Mary had gone to such lengths to harass our daughter at school. He apologized to me, regretting that he could have adjusted his schedule to drop our daughter off at school, thinking that if he had been there for the send-off, he might have been able to stop Mary's wrongdoing. It's hard to imagine Mary, who had never been involved in school events, would show up for a send-off. The resolution left a lot to be desired. However, my father-in-law wasn't done yet. After our conversation, he woke up Mary and Kate to give them a piece of his mind. This lecture apparently went on until the early hours of the morning, leading them to call us before dawn as a form of retaliation.
How do you like being woken up? Because you snitched to Dad. Mom and I got an earful of nagging from him.
I'm too sleep deprived to do any housework, so you come here and make breakfast. It's only fair since you acted all self-righteous and told on us. What an incompetent daughter-in-law you are.
However, I had only answered the phone out of reflex to the ringing and was half asleep throughout their complaints, eventually falling back asleep. Seemingly taking my mumbled responses seriously, Mary thought I was coming over to make breakfast and didn't prepare anything for my father-in-law. This led to him getting upset, wondering if his lecture hadn't been enough, and rushing to make breakfast himself. In her haste, she made extremely salty scrambled eggs, and my father-in-law apparently commented that a wife who can't even make proper eggs and only knows how to get others in trouble is useless, almost like declaring a divorce. My husband thinks that this incident has finally gotten to Mary, and she might quiet down for a while. I hope so. Given all the times Mary has caused trouble, I wonder if just the threat of divorce would be enough to calm her down. But in reality, as my husband predicted, there were no more sarcastic calls from Mary or Kate, and we had peaceful days until Emily returned from her school trip. She couldn't stop talking about her trip, and during dinner, I had to remind her to either eat or talk. She excitedly shared her experiences, with gestures and all, right up until bedtime. She had only a limited amount of pocket money for the trip, but still bought souvenirs for us. She even thought of her cousin who couldn't go. Emily had noticed her cousin's absence and asked why. The teacher, not revealing the true reason of unpaid fees, simply said she fell ill suddenly. Hearing this, Emily bought matching keychains in different colors for her. I told her that her cousin was feeling better and would be back at school. I believe sometimes it's okay to tell a kind lie for someone's sake. A few days later, my father-in-law called us for a talk. The revelation about the unpaid school trip fees led him to contact Kate's ex-husband. My father-in-law had been unaware of their divorce's reason. He apparently avoided the issue because he felt it was a matter between the couple. However, seeing the financial struggles of Kate and my niece, he reached out to see if the ex-husband could contribute even a little in child support. The truth he learned was far different. The divorce was due to Kate's terrible spending habits, which her ex-husband couldn't tolerate any longer. He had initially planned to take custody of my niece, thinking Kate was incapable of single parenting. However, she adamantly refused to let go of her daughter, so he gave up custody in exchange for the divorce. He was desperate to leave her. The ex-husband had been faithfully paying the agreed child support, including separate amounts for school fees. Learning that his daughter missed the trip due to unpaid fees was a devastating and infuriating revelation for him. My father-in-law, too, had been concerned about my niece's lack of school supplies and worn-out stationery, and had given money to Mary to buy new ones. But Mary squandered the money on outings with Kate. Kate also spent the child support from her ex-husband on herself, not on my niece. My father-in-law asked my niece how she managed at school without the necessary supplies. She replied that she was told to borrow from Emily. It all made sense to me then. For a while, I had noticed the contents of Emily's pencil case becoming sparse. She said it was because she and my niece were using them together, but maybe she was actually giving them to her cousin. Perhaps after being asked to borrow supplies so many times, she just started giving them away, like a pencil here and there. Hearing about the true nature of Mary and Kate from my niece, and learning about the misuse of child support and their refusal to let her participate in school events, made me realize it was not good for her education. Realizing that being around adults like Mary and Kate was also not good, my father-in-law, after confirming with Kate's ex-husband, supported the idea of fighting for custody. If one party is stubbornly resistant, such disputes can automatically lead to court. Kate resisted because she didn't want to lose the child support, resulting in a court case. The court judged that she was incapable of parenting, considering her income and lifestyle. After the divorce, Kate neither worked part-time nor used the child support and money from my father-in-law responsibly. The custody battle was quickly settled in court, and my niece was taken in by her father. He had moved back to his parents' home. She will now live a life free from neglect, with the support of her paternal grandparents. Following their quick loss in court, Kate and Mary showed up at my house.
You really went and did something unnecessary. Now you're going to have to give me my allowance.
It was a good source of income. Ever since you married my son, it's been one misfortune after another. You're a jinx.
They had invaded our home early in the morning, rummaging for valuables. I immediately called my father-in-law for help. He arrived, apologized to me and my husband, and took them away in his car. Later, finding themselves without any source of income, they tried shoplifting at a local supermarket and were caught and handed over to the police. They didn't want to ask us for help and couldn't reach my father-in-law at work, causing trouble for him at his job. Eventually, my father-in-law, fed up with their antics, divorced Mary. He left the house to them, choosing to live with us, as he had always been fond of Emily. Mary took as much as she could from the divorce settlement but spent it all without thinking of the future. Even though they could shelter from the rain and wind, their electricity and gas were cut off, and eventually, even their water supply was shut off. When they ran out of cash even to buy food, she came begging to me, asking for forgiveness and pleading for my help, apologizing for everything they had done. "Let's all live together happily as a family," she says, but what does she mean by happily? Weren't they the ones who trampled on my efforts to live harmoniously? Don't they even think about earning their own money to buy food? I can't offer a place to live to those who won't even try to be independent, so I kicked them out of the house. They banged on the door for a while, but eventually, the police came due to a neighbor's call and gave them a warning. Having already been interrogated by the police once, they probably thought it'd be bad to get caught again and finally left. After that, they never came begging to us, but I heard they racked up a lot of debt from shady sources and didn't even try to work to pay it back. Their former house was plastered with demands for repayment, and at one point, loud angry voices could be heard, but now it's quiet, and I've heard neither Mary nor Kate have been seen. I don't know and don't want to know where they are or what they're doing. My niece has been taken in by her father and had to transfer schools. But she and Emily still keep in touch through letters and calls. They seem to enjoy their conversations. My husband and her father, now finding common ground, have been exchanging parenting tips through emails. They're even discussing taking the girls on a small trip together. I just hope for a brighter future for both my niece and Emily. Out of the blue, my 9-year-old son, Nick, was diagnosed with pediatric cancer. Nick had been complaining of persistent fatigue, and while I never thought it was just regular tiredness, pediatric cancer was the last thing on my mind. From that day, he was forced to be hospitalized for tough treatments.
Just being lazy, right? Trying to gain sympathy with something as far-fetched as pediatric cancer. How attention-seeking can you be?
Even when I told Michael about Nick's illness, he didn't take it seriously. Despite being busy with work, he never once visited Nick in the hospital. My MILF, Susan, insisting that housework is the wife's job, never lifted a finger to help and only complained. Then, one day, Susan and Michael, who had never visited before, came to Nick's hospital room.
You know, cancer can be cured with vitamins, right?
Excuse me.
I found lots of stories online about miraculous cancer cures with vitamins. Like, stage 4 cancer disappeared in a week. So, I'll cure our Nick's cancer.
He took the orange juice Nick was drinking, threw it over his head.
I'm going on a week-long spot rip with your grandma. Make sure you're cured by the time I get back.
Shocked by this unbelievable event, both Nick and I were speechless. After they left, Nick burst into tears, relieved from the fear. Cure cancer with vitamins? What is that even about? And who throws liquid on a sick person seriously? Filled with incredible anger, I decided to get back at them. Little did they know, a shocking truth awaited them a week later. I married my first husband, David, when I was 26. He was 4 years older and had been my tutor when I was preparing for high school. After I started working, we reconnected as colleagues. They gradually moved from reminiscing to talking about the future and got married. That's the background of the situation. The following year, Nick was born. Just as our new family began its journey, David passed away due to illness. He had felt fatigue but didn't seek medical attention due to work. One day, he collapsed at work, and upon examination, it was discovered he had cancer. He started treatment immediately, but the disease progressed rapidly, and he passed away 3 months later. Years later, I remarried my current husband, Michael. Initially, I worried about how Nick and Michael, not related by blood, would get along. But gradually, they grew closer, and one day Nick asked if he could call Michael Dad. Surprised, Michael and I exchanged looks, but we knew this was our answer and considered marriage seriously. Our meeting with Michael's parents went smoothly, and they adored Nick as their own grandchild. It was Michael's first marriage, so we invited family and close friends for a wedding ceremony. You would have thought I'd have 2 weddings. I joked with my friends. It was a heartwarming ceremony. However, the seemingly happy in-law family had its issues. Michael's younger brother, who married before us. Michael had moved out when he started working. Marriage was unthinkable, it seemed to be his favorite saying. And his serious brother-in-law decided to take over his parents-in-law's family, got married, and lived with them in the in-laws' house. My mother-in-law, Susan, seems to be at odds with my brother-in-law's wife, Alice, and her complaints about Alice always enter into the conversation, which made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to take sides based only on her complaints, nor did I feel right asking Alice about it. So I mostly nodded along and ignored her rants. But this seemed to encourage her to increasingly intrude into our home. She started staying over for various reasons, and before I knew it, she was staying over half of the month, and eventually moved in with her belongings. She began acting as if she owned the place, and her attitude towards me and Nick changed. At first, my mother-in-law was kind and understanding to me and my son. She began to say sarcastic things that were not important to us. Before remarrying, I was working part-time, getting by with the help of David's estate. Even after remarrying, I continued working part-time, albeit less frequently, to contribute a little extra. Considering Nick's future, having more money is always better. However, Susan implied that my working part-time meant Michael wasn't earning enough and kept telling me to quit.
After all, you're a mom and should prioritize parenting.
I've never once neglected Nick because of my job. We've managed just fine together. But then, Susan started making snide remarks to Nick.
You're the reason your mom struggles. Your new dad even feels embarrassed about you in public.
She blamed Nick for making Michael feel uncomfortable and started forcing him to do middle school level workbooks, which were too advanced for a child in lower elementary. He hasn't even learned the basics, and she's making him do middle school workbooks. Of course, Nick couldn't answer any questions and ended up crying. She'd even take away his meals, saying his crying was annoying and that boys shouldn't cry so much. Gradually, Nick became afraid of her and started avoiding being alone with her.
What an unlovable brat. He lacks cuteness because he doesn't get enough motherly love. What kind of parenting is this?
She said it so that my son could hear her, so my son would often say sorry and apologize to me. It must have been hard for him that I was being blamed because of him. If I confronted Susan directly, she'd take it out on Nick, so I gradually became unable to voice my opinions. But considering Nick's welfare, I couldn't stay silent. I waited for Michael, who was often away for work, to come home and then shared everything about Susan's behavior. But he didn't believe me, insisting that his mother couldn't possibly say such things or treat a child badly.
You say my mom's terrible, but maybe you're the one being harsh to her.
What?
I've heard complaints. You can handle the housework properly. Since we can live on my income, just focus on the house and stop working outside.
I was baffled. I'd been told to quit my job but had never forced housework onto Susan. In fact, I had never seen her do any housework. She'd just sit around like the lady of the house, ordering me around. She complained about the seasoning of meals, but I'd never had a chance to taste her preferred seasoning. How could I guess flavors I've never tried? I'm not a mind reader. I almost spoke back many times but always held back. Fearing Nick would become her target. Gradually, Michael's attitude toward Nick and me became colder. Still, coldness was bearable. Sometimes, he'd get so angry it was as if another personality had taken over. He never hit us, but he'd throw things, sometimes hitting Nick. Once, when Nick cried from pain and fear, Michael dragged him outside, saying to stay there until he stopped crying. I shielded Nick, ready to be hit, but luckily, Michael lost interest, muttering it was a turn off. He must be stressed from work. I fought, believing he'd return to his kind self if he calmed down. I decided to endure, prepared to protect Nick from harm, but it wasn't easy. Amidst these unresolved issues with Susan and Michael, Nick turned 9. He loved basketball and started attending a clinic held by an amateur basketball team. Having something to focus on, and less time facing Susan, he seemed much happier. Then, one day, he started feeling unwell. At first, I thought he'd overdone it with basketball and let him rest, but a week passed without improvement. It seemed to worsen, so I took him to the pediatrician we'd always relied on. They suggested we get more thorough tests at a larger hospital. I was clueless about big hospitals. The only experience I had was when David was treated. The doctor, having connections, wrote a referral for us. I was advised to get a medical consultation as soon as possible, preferably by tomorrow. I was grateful for seeing a familiar doctor first, but at the same time terrified that Nick might have a serious illness. I told Michael, asking him to come with us, but he refused.
It's probably just him faking it. Did something happen at school? If you believe everything a kid says, no amount of money will ever be enough. Big hospitals are expensive, right? Cover it with your part-time income.
I've heard of kids using sickness as a way to rebel against their parents. But would a child fake being sick to the point of not eating well and continue it for a week? Even adults find it hard to fast for a week to make a statement. It requires extraordinary determination. In any case, Nick's illness lasting a week surely meant something was wrong. I had no issue paying with my part-time income and declared to Michael that I would take Nick to the hospital alone. He just responded with a dismissive "do whatever you want," and was visibly upset that evening. The next day at the hospital, they prepared for the worst-case scenario. When I asked the doctor what that meant, they said pediatric cancer. Symptoms can be similar to a cold, including abdominal pain or sudden weight loss. They asked if I had noticed anything unusual, and Nick revealed he had been experiencing joint pain. When I asked why he hadn't mentioned it, he said he didn't want to worry me more or have me face unpleasant comments from Michael and Susan. I felt terrible that he was suffering yet worried about me. Perhaps if I had managed things better with Michael and Susan, I would have noticed the signs of Nick's discomfort earlier. As I reflected on my shortcomings, another shock hit me. Nick's illness was an early symptom of pediatric cancer. He had to be hospitalized, and while preparing for his stay, I informed Michael and Susan.
Pediatric cancer. A worthless burden that costs a fortune. I won't pay a dime.
Cancer hereditary, right? David died of cancer, didn't he? Thanks for passing on such a great legacy.
Michael added coldly. Their heartlessness was beyond belief. Cancer treatments can be quite expensive. Susan was only worried about the cost. Michael even said in front of me that the treatment expenses would come out of my part-time income. I couldn't stand being around these foolish people any longer, so I quickly left for the hospital where Nick awaited. Nick had to give up basketball, which he loved, and his enjoyable school life to focus on the treatment. Fortunately, the pediatric ward had a school, so he wouldn't fall behind in his studies. But seeing other children in much worse conditions was a shock to him.
Will I end up like them? Will I never play basketball again? I wanted to become a star player to make your life easier, Mom.
He felt guilty for burdening me with his illness. It's said that a patient's mental state can influence their condition, so I was advised to avoid making him feel like a burden. I've never blamed him, but maybe my worry showed. Maybe I unconsciously emitted an aura of anxiety that he picked up on. I resolved to bolster my spirits and encourage Nick, who was becoming increasingly disheartened. There were times he cried out, wishing to die rather than getting better. The side effects were so painful that it seemed unbearable. They say even adults find some cancer treatment stuff to the point where they feel like giving up. I thought I understood the hardships of cancer treatment from David's experience, but he hadn't undergone extensive treatment. In reality, I only thought I knew. You can say anything with words. But I wanted to truly support Nick. I sought opportunities to hear from those who had experienced similar situations. We were introduced to a college hospital where I met a student who had survived pediatric cancer. I listened to the person's story and asked what words were painful and what words made him or her happy. And what they wished to hear was incredibly helpful. Despite our struggles, neither Michael nor Susan visited Nick. Frankly, their presence would likely dampen our spirits, so their absence was preferable. However, a bit of concern when I returned home for Nick's clothes would have been appreciated.
Back at the hospital again. Aren't you my wife? Why are you neglecting our home to do this?
The rare times he spoke to me were just to berate me for prioritizing Nick over being a good wife. Whether at the hospital or home, there was never a moment of peace for me. I was constantly on edge, barely getting by on sheer willpower. Amidst all this, my father-in-law, Bob, was the only one who consistently came to visit us. His care for Nick and me, and our light-hearted conversations, allowed us to momentarily forget the harsh reality. I can't be more grateful to Bob. It was also a joy to see Nick, who usually seemed uninterested, smile more whenever his grandfather visited. Bob once confided in me that he had lost a close friend to cancer. Having witnessed the burden on the caregiving family and his friends struggle with harsh treatments, he expressed a desire to help us in any way he could. Just knowing his intentions was enough for me. I wish that Michael and Susan, who I live with, could have even a tenth of Bob's compassion. But expecting something and being let down hurts more, so I decided not to hope for anything. One day, Susan and Michael, who had shown no interest in Nick's battle with illness, came to his hospital room.
How long do you plan to run away from home like a teenage rebel? The house is a mess because you're not there.
A wife has her duties, right? When it's time for someone to die, they'll die, so just leave it be. The cure for cancer is just a matter of luck anyway.
Cure for cancer a matter of luck. Everyone dies eventually. What are those the words you say in a ward where many are striving for recovery? Were they always this despicable? I was so enraged and dumbfounded that I lost all reason. There are things you should and shouldn't say, right? There's a time and place for everything, isn't there? Don't you, who have lived many times longer than Nick, know that? Maybe you both should get a brain scan. Sometimes tumors in the brain can cause personality changes. I remembered some medical drama with a similar plot, though it was a vague memory. I said it confidently, hoping to scare them a bit.
You're insulting the mother who raised me. Your son's weak and got cancer because of your poor parenting, right? I read online that cancer can be instantly cured by just taking vitamins. I'll cure him.
Michael grabbed Nick's half-finished orange juice and poured it over his head. It was a move so unexpected that I couldn't intervene. Nick and I were so shocked that we could only stand there, stunned. Michael and Susan pointed and laughed at us.
I'm going on a trip with Mom. If your stupid son's illness isn't cured by the time we return, who knows what we'll do. Keep that in mind.
Make sure you clean up the house by the time we're back.
They left the room after their one-sided tirade. As the tension eased, Nick burst into tears, overwhelmed by fear. The nurses rushed in upon hearing the commotion, busying themselves with cleaning and changing the sheets. Meanwhile, Nick and I waited in an empty room. I apologized to Nick for making our supposedly normal life, especially our home, a place of fear for him. I regretted my naive hope that reducing contact with Susan could somehow make things better, and for enduring these past years, I apologized to Nick. He comfortingly said he endured the mean granny just like I did, showing his kind nature. I vowed to exact an unforgettable revenge on Michael and Susan for their cruel words to Nick. About a week after making my vow of revenge, Michael called me.
Hey, why can't I get into my own house? What kind of wife locks out her husband? Do you forget who's providing for you?
His voice was so loud, it rang in my ears, even with the phone's volume down. When did that house become his, anyway? That house was inherited from David. Michael suggested we start our married life there since his apartment lease was nearing renewal. He had said we'd eventually move to a new place, but there was no sign of that happening. before remarrying, a friend of David had offered to buy the house, offering a price above market value. I considered it, thinking we'd move to a new home after remarrying, and Michael might feel uncomfortable in David's house. The offer was tempting, with the location and layout being ideal, and they were willing to meet my asking price. However, I couldn't part with the memories of David and kept the house. I told them we could discuss it again when I was ready to sell. However, Michael never mentioned moving out, and Susan made herself at home, leading to our current situation. I recalled someone saying that memories aren't in things but in people's minds. It's only now that I truly understand that sentiment, albeit a bit late. I should have sold the house when Susan started to overstay. When I approached David's acquaintance about selling the house, although it was belated, they were delighted to help. They even apologized for bringing up the sale during a time when I was grieving. The paperwork for the sale had already been completed. They were considerate about my move and Nick's illness, agreeing to work around my schedule for handing over the house. I was grateful, but to truly get revenge on Michael and Susan, I moved out promptly. I sent Michael and Susan's belongings to their family home, charging them for the shipping. Nick and I took only the essentials and had already moved into our new place. When Michael kept insisting it was his house, I reminded him it was inherited from David and belonged to me. He was momentarily taken aback but quickly retaliated.
Even if that's true, you had no right to make decisions without consulting me, who lived there with you. I paid for the maintenance, so it's my house.
Living in the house, we also faced issues like poor water flow and faulty toilets, signs of deterioration. He argued nonsensically that because he had paid for some repairs, the house belonged to him. I ignored his reasoning and declared my intention to divorce him. Hearing our conversation, Susan interjected.
What an ungrateful woman. After accepting you, a remarried woman with baggage, as a daughter-in-law, you want a divorce? Women like you are a nuisance wherever you go.
I'm saying I'll disappear from your lives, which should make you happy. Why not just agree to the divorce? You should be relieved to see me go. Be honest for once. Caught by the truth, Susan fell silent. I didn't think this gave me the upper hand, though. I had to be extra cautious and not give them any advantage. When I discussed selling the house, David's acquaintance asked if something had happened. I confessed that I had planned to sell the house inherited from David once I found a new place to live with Michael. However, that was delayed due to his procrastination and Susan's domineering presence. I had given up on mending my relationship with Susan long ago. I admitted my indecisiveness in hoping Michael would return to his former self. The acquaintance, after hearing everything, sympathized with our situation and introduced me to a competent lawyer. The lawyer, very supportive, assured me we'd pursue a divorce that would lead to happiness for us. I initiated the divorce through the lawyer, and Michael eventually agreed, finalizing it. There was a reason David's acquaintance was so helpful. They were executives at a company that did business with Michael's employer, and Michael was the responsible officer for that account. When they requested a change of personnel from Michael's company, he was summoned by his boss, who demanded to know what offense he had committed. The company didn't want to lose a major client. Michael, clueless, denied any wrongdoing. However, upon further investigation by his boss, it was revealed that Michael had a bad reputation, and his colleagues confirmed he had been cruel to his stepson. I heard that Michael was going around telling his colleagues and subordinates that his stepson was weak, stupid, and useless. Just recently, he boasted about curing Nick's supposed pediatric cancer by pouring vitamin-rich orange juice over his head. A subordinate checked the website Michael mentioned, finding it suspicious and linked to a scam recently exposed in the news. The organization Michael was involved with turned out to be the seller of so-called miracle water at outrageous prices. When he was severely reprimanded by his boss, he defiantly responded,
"Does it matter to the company what I do to the kid? It's none of your business."
He even bragged about how he had disciplined Nick. The company pointed out his behavior deviated too much from normal societal standards and told him it was too risky to keep such a person employed in this day and age. He was fired. Later, he heard rumors that an executive at a client company was acquainted with me. In reality, the person was a friend of David, but rumors often get twisted. Panicked, Michael sought my help. He showed up at my workplace, unaware of my new address. It turns out David's friend had been making moves, complicating his efforts to find a new job. Even without their interference, he would have had to explain his firing from the previous company. There must have been a significant reason for it. I told Michael, who only came to me when he was in trouble, that he got what he deserved and turned him away. Susan had nonchalantly returned to her family home, but there was no place for her anymore. When I decided to divorce, I made sure to tell Bob, who adored Nick, everything that had happened. He was heartbroken that his young grandson had been targeted and became furious upon learning the truth. The fact that Alice had also been mistreated by Susan came to light, and he finally lost his patience with her. When Susan returned as if nothing had happened, he told her they were getting divorced. Initially, she resisted, but then agreed, thinking it was better to receive alimony than to stay with an unwanted Alice and a husband who no longer cared for her. However, she ended up being the one who had to pay alimony, demanded by her Alice for mental distress. Michael, who had been temporarily staying with Susan, was also kicked out of the family home after Bob discovered their mistreatment of me and Nick. Susan and Michael are now living together in a run-down apartment, surviving as best as they can. He struggles to find steady work, managing only to get by with day labor. Susan, having been a housewife for years, refuses to work, and they are constantly fighting, each blaming the other. Their loud arguments have even led to noise complaints and warnings from the police. Both are to blame. Susan initiated the trouble, and Michael went along with it, but he shares the responsibility from the moment he participated. As for Susan, she seems too stubborn and thick-skinned to be affected by any downfall. After everything was settled, Bob visited me and Nick once. He was deeply apologizing for the actions of his wife and son. He wished us happiness and quietly gave me some money as compensation, which I initially refused. But he insisted, saying it was the least he could do since he couldn't be there to see Nick recover. Once I divorced, Nick felt a sense of relief from being free of the fear and control of his stepfather and grandmother, and his mood stabilized. The doctor started noting his good condition more frequently as he became more positive. Having goals helped him endure tough treatments without complaints. His efforts paid off, and he was granted temporary discharge. If there were no issues, he could gradually return to normal life while continuing treatment. Over time, his condition further stabilized, allowing him to attend school with some restrictions. Though he sometimes needs to be hospitalized, it's not for as long as before. He sets small goals for himself, like things to do or eat after his hospital stays or treatments, focusing on his recovery. This school and its students are understanding and supportive, giving me peace of mind when sending him there. I feel relieved and happy seeing his steady recovery. Now, I'm determined to walk towards greater happiness with Nick, side by side.
I just got a call from the hospital saying that Emily was rushed there in an emergency. Hurry to the hospital. I'm at home right now, but I'll head there immediately, my husband, Daniel, said. I was momentarily confused by what he meant. Then, puzzled, I replied, I'm at my parents' house right now, but what do you mean? Did the hospital really call? Daniel, clearly irritated, said, Yes, that's why I'm telling you to hurry up. But as I looked at my daughter, sleeping next to me, I said, Emily's right here sleeping next to me, though. Hearing this, Daniel was speechless and just uttered, Oh? My name is Laura Thompson. I'm a 33-year-old housewife. I live with my daughter, Emily, and Daniel, who is 2 years older than me. Emily, who just turned 10 and is in the 4th grade. I quit my full-time job when Emily was born, but started working part-time when she entered elementary school. Daniel graduated from a top university and works for a leading trading company in the U.S. We met in college when a friend invited me to a drinking party, where we happened to sit next to each other. We exchanged contacts and occasionally met up for movies and coffee. We weren't in a serious relationship, but I didn't mind meeting him. Maybe I bragged a bit to my friends about having a friend from a prestigious university. However, after meeting a few times, Daniel asked me out, and we started dating. I wasn't particularly in love, but I didn't dislike him either. Honestly, I tend to go with the flow and make decisions based on others' influence. When Daniel asked for my contact, I wasn't particularly attracted to him, but I gave it to him anyway, and I hung out with him, just to avoid the hassle of saying no. I've always thought life is easier when someone else makes decisions. So when Daniel proposed after graduation, I accepted without much thought. I figured being married to someone successful meant I wouldn't have to worry about money. My friends envied me for marrying an elite, but I wasn't particularly moved. On the other hand, Daniel has always been considered a prodigy and confidently made his own decisions, believing they were always right. Honestly, he can be quite condescending, which is why I think many people dislike him. For Daniel, I must have been easy to control, so he probably found me easy to deal with. I think he married me more for convenience than love. In fact, I always let him make decisions, and if he opposes something I want to do, I immediately give it up. It's tiring to fight for what I want, and there's rarely anything I want that much. Since we started dating, there's been a clear hierarchy in our relationship. Daniel often says, "Laura, you can't do anything without me." Whenever I express a different opinion, he says, "How dare you go against my opinion, Laura? You should just do as I say." Many people would see this as condescending, When I mentioned this to a friend, she was concerned and said, "It's totally wrong. But in my mind, our marriage works, so it must be fine." There are as many right ways to have a marriage as there are couples. That's what I always tell myself. Until that day. One day, during Emily's summer break, we decided to stay at my parents' house for a few days. My parents wanted to see their granddaughter, so we planned a short visit. Of course, I discussed it with Daniel well in advance. He readily agreed. I was glad, as I would have canceled it if he had opposed it. Daniel couldn't join us because of work, but that wasn't an issue, as my parents just wanted to see Emily. "Say hi to your folks for me," he said as we left. My parents' house is about a 30-minute drive away. When we visited, my parents welcomed us warmly. It had been over half a year since our last visit. I always think about visiting them more often, but it's hard with our busy schedules.
When a housewife slacks off on her chores, it's the same as me not going to work. It's negligence. You seem to think that working a part-time job counts as real work, but that's hardly the case at all. There's no real responsibility involved, so it's just like a hobby. A real job like mine involves significant responsibility and comes with a salary that reflects that.
I don't visit my parents too often because I can tell it makes him grumpy. So once every 6 months is just about right. Despite this, he doesn't help at all with the housework or childcare. He has no idea how tough it is to juggle a part-time job, house chores, and looking after our daughter. Of course, expressing such complaints would only lead to more scolding from him, so I keep quiet, but the dissatisfaction is definitely building up inside. My mom always says it must be tough for me, so I should relax and take it easy, and I decided to take her words to heart to recharge. She even cooked lunch for me. Mom's cooking is always so delicious. It may sound old-fashioned to talk about Mom's cooking, but there's something special about the taste you've grown up with. I can always relax when I'm at my parents' house. Since some of my old friends still live in the neighborhood, I thought about inviting them over for to eat later. As I was thinking about this, I felt full and content. I dozed off. Emily joined me in a nap. Soon, I was woken up by the sound of my phone ringing in the distance. It was a call from Daniel.
I can't understand people who still use phones. They are old. People who prefer phone calls over messaging must be incompetent at their jobs. With texts or emails, you can convey just the essentials and the recipient can check them at their convenience. Phone calls, on the other hand, are intrusive, disregarding the other person's situation, and you can't just hang up after stating your business, leading to wasted time. It's not cost-effective at all. Don't call me unless it's really necessary.
He insists, so I knew he must really hate phone calls. Once when I called him, he lectured me for ages about forgetting his dislike for them. Of course, I've almost never gotten calls from him. I can barely remember the last time he called me. He is now calling me, which must mean something urgent. Feeling a bit anxious, I answered the phone. It was unusual for him to sound so flustered, as he said, "Emily was just rushed to the hospital. Hurry up and get there. I'm at home now, but I'll head over too." For a moment, I couldn't grasp what he was saying. Confused, I replied, "What? I'm at my parents' house right now, but what do you mean? Did the hospital really call?" Annoyed, Daniel said, "Yes, That's why I'm telling you to hurry. However, looking at my daughter, sleeping next to me, I said, Emily's right here sleeping next to me though. Hearing this, Daniel just muttered, "Oh," and was at a loss for words. What could this mean? I was completely baffled, so I asked him, was it just the wrong number? But you believed it and were so worried, so it must have seemed real, right? Suddenly, he snapped, "Shut up. If it was a mistake, then there's no problem," and hung up the phone. What was all that about? It's unlike Daniel to make a wrong number call and even contact me about it. He's always calm and doesn't make a call unless he's sure. If he had any doubts, he would have probably sent a message first. I couldn't believe it was just a wrong number, so I decided to call the hospital myself. I told the receptionist Daniel's name and that I was his wife, and they transferred me to someone in charge.
Yes, Daniel's daughter has indeed been brought here. Please come to the hospital as soon as possible. She's not in a life-threatening condition, but she collapsed in the middle of the street. The preliminary test didn't find anything unusual, but we don't know the cause of her collapse, so she'll be admitted for further testing.
When I asked if they were sure it was Daniel's daughter, they replied she had Daniel's wallet with her and said it was her dad's, so we're pretty sure. The wallet had his driver's license in it, and she recognized him from the photo. They had contacted him using the business card in the wallet. It all made sense. But since my daughter, Emily, was sleeping right next to me, it couldn't be her. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. As I was trying to make sense of it all, the person on the phone asked, "You are Daniel's wife, right? So you're her mother, and will be coming over, right?" I tend to agree to things when asked, so I instinctively said, "Oh, yes. I'm on my way." After hanging up, I thought to myself, what's the point of me going there if it's just some unknown girl admitted to the hospital? But since I said I'd go, I felt I had to. I was also curious about why the girl had Daniel's wallet. The most likely explanation seemed to be that she had found the wallet and mistook it for her father's. I asked my parents to look after Emily and headed to the hospital alone. It wasn't too far, just about a 30-minute drive. Luckily, the traffic wasn't bad, and I arrived in about 30 minutes as expected. At the hospital, I gave Daniel's name at the reception, and a nurse led me to the room of the girl who had his wallet. They said she could talk, as she didn't seem to have any physical injuries or illness. When I entered the room, I saw a girl about the same age as Emily sleeping there. The nurse cheerfully said, "Your mom is here." The girl woke up. But since I wasn't her mother, she naturally asked the nurse, "Mom's here. Where is she?" The nurse, thinking I was her mother, said, "Right in front of you." The girl looked at me, confused, and said, "This lady isn't my mom. I don't know her. Who is she?" as she turned to the nurse. The nurse was surprised and asked, "Wait, is there some mistake? You're not her mom. Could you look again?" But the girl firmly denied again, saying, "Definitely not. She's not my mom. I've never seen her before." Hearing this, the nurse's face stiffened with a look of disbelief. She turned to me, now filled with distrust, and asked, "Who are you?" Thinking it's better to be honest rather than causing more confusion, I explained, "Actually, I heard that a girl with my husband's wallet was brought to the hospital, and I came to find out why." The nurse, confused, asked, "You mean you're the wife of the wallet's owner? But if you're not this girl's mother, what's going on?" "I have no idea either. Daniel hasn't told me anything." I then turned to the girl to clear things up. "Hi there, I'm Laura. What's your name?" The girl replied openly, "I'm Michelle, Michelle Johnson." The name Johnson rang a bell. I remembered a woman named Emily Johnson among Daniel's colleagues at our wedding. She was quite close to Daniel, which struck me as odd. Despite my presence, she had taken photos with him, arms draped around each other, and even hugged him to offer congratulations. I remembered complaining about their excessive closeness. Daniel had explained she was just more physically affectionate, but I couldn't shake off a feeling of suspicion. The girl shared the same last name as that woman. The surname Johnson is easy to remember. As far as I know, I'm only aware of one person with that name. Dismissing this as a coincidence seems far-fetched. Fearing the worst, but keeping calm, I continued talking to Michelle. "I'm a friend of your dad. He's busy with work and can't come, so he asked me to check on you. I heard you have his wallet. Is that true? He asked me to confirm it. Can I see it?" Michelle obediently showed me the wallet, which I recognized immediately as Daniel's. In fact, I had given it to him as a birthday present, so there was no mistaking it. There was no doubt now. "Can I see what's inside, just to be sure?" I asked. She showed me, and it contained Daniel's business cards and driver's license. This confirmed it was indeed his wallet. But there was a chance Michelle was mistaken. So I asked, just to double check, "What's your dad's name?" She promptly replied, "My dad's name is Daniel Thompson. He works at the same company as my mom." This wasn't a misunderstanding. Moreover, she said her mom worked at the same company as Daniel. My worst fears seemed to be becoming reality, but I had to be sure. I asked Michelle why her last name was different from her dad's, but she hesitated and didn't provide a clear answer. "But Mom said she's going to change your last name to his soon," was all she said. Taking a leap, I asked, "Is your mom's name Emily, by any chance?" She confirmed, "Yes, that's right. Are you friends with her too?" My suspicions were confirmed. Just as I was grappling with this shocking revelation, I heard a voice from behind.
"Hey, what are you doing here?"
It was Daniel. I was surprised, but it made sense for him to be here, since his daughter was hospitalized. Plus, he knew about the wallet with his driver's license. Trying to remain calm, I asked, "Why are you here? You were angry about a wrong number earlier. So if you're here, does that mean it wasn't a wrong number after all?" I wanted to hear his explanation. He awkwardly said, "I came because I heard someone had my wallet. Maybe she found it after I lost it." Michelle then clarified, "Dad left it at our house when he visited. I was bringing it back to him, but collapsed on the way."
"What are you talking about? Maybe she hit her head when she collapsed, or the medication is affecting her. She must be mistaking me for her dad. Hope her real dad shows up soon. I'll take the wallet then."
In his explanation, Daniel, flustered, talked over Michelle's words and forcibly took the wallet from her. Michelle, upset by Daniel's incomprehensible actions and his forceful taking of the wallet, ended up crying. Ignoring her tears, he said, "I'm leaving now. You're heading back too, right? See you then," and quickly left. As Daniel and I were about to leave the hospital room, he bumped into a man entering. "Oh, sorry," Daniel said, trying to continue on. But the man stopped him.
Excuse me, aren't you Daniel?
Daniel, not expecting to hear his name here, responded with surprise. "Yes, that's me, but who might you be?" It was clear he didn't recognize the man. The man glanced at Michelle and whispered, "Perhaps you'll understand if I say I'm her grandfather." Hearing this, I couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Daniel was even more astonished. His eyes were wide and mouth was trembling. Obviously, he was struggling to find words, but he couldn't say anything. The man said, "I need to talk to you about something not suitable in front of the child. Could you step outside for a moment? It won't take long." Daniel, pale-faced, followed him out of the room. Wanting to be part of the conversation, I followed them and asked the man, "May I join you?" He initially hesitated, saying the conversation was extremely private. But when I quickly stated, "I'm actually his wife," he looked surprised and nodded in acknowledgement. Daniel, seemingly not wanting me there, tried to object, but was silenced by the man's stern gaze. We left the hospital and entered a nearby cafe. The man introduced himself as Tom Johnson. "I'm Michelle's grandfather. You're Daniel's wife. I'm terribly sorry for what my daughter, Emily, has done. Please forgive us." He apologized sincerely. I had my suspicions, but needed confirmation. Johnson revealed a shocking truth.
I only found out today from my daughter that Michelle is actually my granddaughter. Emily left home about 10 years ago to live alone, and I didn't know she was raising a child as a single mother.
He continued, explaining. As expected, hearing it from someone else was quite shocking.
Today, when she happened to return to our home, that man, Daniel, called our daughter. After the call, she visibly became suspicious. Upon questioning, she confessed to having a 10-year-old child. She probably panicked when she heard her daughter was hospitalized. Otherwise, she might not have confessed, so the timing of the call was fortunate. For that man, it must have been the worst timing, though.
Tom explained how he came to be involved. Then I asked, "And she also confessed that the father is Daniel, right?" He nodded in agreement.
Yes, exactly. I came to the hospital after learning that the father of the child is a married man. My daughter told me the child's father would come to retrieve his wallet.
Looking at Daniel, he was trembling. I thought he was trembling out of regret for his misdeeds. But then, he suddenly shouted angrily, "What the hell? She told everything. This is ridiculous." He was shaking with anger, not remorse. His behavior, especially in front of his mistress's father, was unbelievable. Was he really such a person? I thought he was proud, but I didn't expect him to lack any sense of ethics. I felt deeply ashamed to be his wife. Naturally, Tom was furious at his words.
Do you realize what you're saying? I admit my daughter did something terrible to your wife, but you are not blameless. In fact, you should be apologizing to us. What are you misunderstanding?
His anger was justified. But then Daniel said something unbelievable.
Blameless? What are you talking about? Making me feel this uncomfortable is a huge sin. Why should I apologize to you? Being able to have my child should be considered a blessing. You should be thanking me.
He was completely unrepentant, looking down on us instead. Where did he get such confidence? I couldn't tolerate it anymore. So I said, "Unbelievable. You're justifying having an affair and a secret child. I can't live with someone like you. We're definitely getting a divorce." Daniel was shocked and confused, as I had always followed his decisions without question. "What are you saying? You can't do anything without me. You should just obey what I decide. There's no way we're getting a divorce," he exclaimed. But my decision was firm. I couldn't possibly live with such a terrible person. It would be detrimental to my daughter's upbringing. Fortunately, she was with my parents, so I decided to go home, pack up my essentials, and stay with my parents. I couldn't stand being in the same space as Daniel anymore. "I've heard enough. I'm leaving. I don't think we'll ever see each other again, unless it's in court," I said and left, ignoring Daniel's red-faced protests. When I returned home and told my parents everything, they were furious and supported my decision to divorce. They said my daughter and I could live with them, so I no longer had to worry about a place to stay. Later, Daniel tried to resist the divorce, leading to mediation. Due to having a secret child, he was in a disadvantaged position, and the divorce was granted mostly in my favor. I received a considerable amount of alimony, which must have been a blow to him. However, that wasn't the end. Tom, the father of Daniel's mistress, turned out to be a senior executive at one of Daniel's client companies. Unaware of this, Daniel had insulted him. Daniel didn't know him since Dom wasn't his direct client contact, but of course, such disrespect would be unforgivable. Tom reported directly to the company about a married man in their ranks having an affair with his daughter, saying he couldn't do business with a company harboring such a man. The company, to avoid losing a major client, significantly reduced Daniel's salary and transferred him to a subsidiary. Being a man of pride, he resigned. He thought he could easily find another job due to his elite university background. However, his egocentric nature was evident in interviews, and he failed to secure a position at any company he applied to. He ended up at a small firm with even lower pay than the subsidiary he had refused. In such a place, boasting about his high education only made him a subject of ridicule. Desperate with his dire situation, Daniel contacted me, attempting reconciliation. When I firmly stated that there was no way I would reconcile with someone heartless, he then demanded to see our daughter. Daniel claimed that it was his right as a father to see our daughter, but Emily, being 10 years old, surprisingly understands what her father did and has firmly said she doesn't want to meet him. He seemed to have given up after I told him this. I'm relieved to hear my daughter's words. It seems she's growing up well. Michelle, who was hospitalized, underwent thorough examinations, but nothing serious was found. She has been discharged and is now living happily with her mother. It appears she fainted due to a slight case of anemia, so I'm relieved. Following the incident, Michelle has also expressed that she doesn't want to see her father. She's innocent in all of this, so I hope she can forget her father's existence and find happiness. Thankfully, she has her grandfather's financial support, so there's no need to worry. Speaking of which, I also received alimony as compensation for the affair, both from Daniel and his mistress. In a way, I'm grateful to them for providing the impetus for our divorce. Emily, the mistress, seemed genuinely remorseful and insisted that I accept the alimony, so I did. My hard work at my part-time job was recognized, and I was happily hired as a full-time employee. With the alimony from both Daniel and his mistress, I don't foresee any financial difficulties ahead. I plan to work hard and live a joyful life with my daughter.
I came today with a gift for your baby's birth. I asked around and bought some good formula milk, so please make sure to give it to your child.
My mother-in-law, Elizabeth, said that while handing me a can of formula milk right after I had given birth. She always believed, without any basis, that I married her son Rick for his money and had constantly harassed me. It felt strange and suspicious to see her presenting a gift with a smile.
I hope they grow up healthy.
She said that, leaving without any of her usual snide remarks. Her departure felt eerie. Puzzled, I showed the formula milk to my mother, who had come to visit. She turned pale and urgently said,
"Don't open it. Throw it away right now."
Then she rushed to the police station with the milk.
"Please examine this powder. I think it's not formula milk."
I was shocked and bewildered by what my mother reported to the police. I'm Sarah, a daycare worker. I love spending time with the adorable children, even though it's always busy due to constant staff shortages. That's when I met Rick. He's a police officer. He visited the daycare where I work to teach the kids about road safety. Every year, it seems that the police collaborate with daycare centers to teach preschoolers about traffic rules before they start elementary school, and it's usually the responsibility of new officers. Rick, young and full of justice, was popular among the daycare staff, and I found him wonderful too. Our relationship started when he gave me his contact information, and I responded. We fell in love, started dating, and got married within a year. Rick, diligent at work and helpful at home, made our married life blissful. However, I faced one major problem: my relationship with Elizabeth. She seemed convinced I married Rick, a public servant, for his status, and had a low opinion of me. I realized this during my second visit to their home. We were discussing wedding plans at their place. I went to help Elizabeth in the kitchen, where she shockingly said,
Even someone as uneducated as you can have an easy life by flattering a public servant.
Excuse me, what do you mean?
Well, being a daycare worker isn't exactly a smart person's job, is it? The pay isn't great, and you must have been worried about your future. But marrying a police officer like Rick means you're set for life.
I was stunned by her words. I tried to explain that I didn't marry Rick for his money. I married him for who he is. But Elizabeth never listened.
You might deceive Rick, but you can't fool me.
She said that, leaving me frozen in shock. From then on, every time I visited their home, she would make snide remarks. Since our houses were close, sometimes we'd see each other as often as once a week. It was always painful, but I endured it because Rick had a good relationship with her. About 6 months into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. Rick was overjoyed, and so was I. There were other things that made me happy about being pregnant. It was the fact that I didn't have to see Elizabeth for a while. I asked my mother to help with household chores. Elizabeth's offer to help would have made me uncomfortable. Rick understood and made sure Elizabeth didn't visit. Since our houses are close, I used to be called to my in-laws' house frequently, so not having to see Elizabeth was a relief. However, the distance from my mother-in-law was only until I entered the stable phase of my pregnancy. She called me after that, inviting me to collect vegetables from the family garden. As Rick couldn't come to do work commitments, I had to go alone. When I went to my in-laws' house, my father-in-law, Jason, welcomed me warmly and filled a bag with fresh vegetables for me.
They are pesticide-free, so they should be good for you and the baby. Eat plenty of them.
He said kindly, making me feel grateful and appreciated. But as I was about to leave, something terrifying happened. Just as I stepped down the front stairs, I suddenly felt a push on my back. Desperately protecting my belly, I twisted and fell, sliding down the stairs shoulder first. It was only about 4 steps, but they were tiled, and I scraped my shoulder and elbow. Enduring the intense pain, I looked up to see Elizabeth, smirking down at me.
What a pity.
She said that nonchalantly after seeing that I hadn't hit my stomach, and then she went back inside. I had only dealt with her snide remarks before, but now I feared for my life. I discreetly confided in my mother, who was visiting. She listened intently and asked me to tell her immediately if anything else happened. After that, I made sure to visit my in-laws only when Rick was with me, and spent most of my time at home with my mom. This helped me avoid further harassment from Elizabeth. Thankfully, I gave birth to a healthy son, Kevin. Holding my little boy, all the pain and troubles seemed to vanish. After returning home, my mom helped take care of the baby, replacing Rick, who was busy with work. I was slowly getting the hang of this new parenting role. Then, unexpectedly, Elizabeth showed up one day.
I came to give a present for the baby's birth. I asked around and bought some good formula milk. Please make sure to give it to your child.
Thank you. She was constantly smiling. However, that actually made me feel uneasy, as it was a stark contrast to her usual glaring. I hope he grows up healthy, she said before leaving. As I was pondering over her uncharacteristic behavior, my mom approached, holding Kevin.
What did she want?
She brought some formula milk she heard was good from the neighbors. I replied my mom, pulling out the formula can from the plastic bag. Instantly, my mom backed away with a shocked expression.
Don't bring that near me.
What's wrong?
Sarah, you mustn't open that can.
She warned, then quickly put Kevin in his crib and snatched the bag from me.
We need to go to the police right now and tell Rick.
Why? Surprised, I followed her, carrying Kevin. We rushed to the police station where Rick worked.
Rick, this formula is dangerous. Please check it immediately.
Lisa, what's wrong?
Sarah received it. I think it's lime.
Lime? I gasped, staring into the bag. Rick's face turned serious as he took the can. He then discussed it with his supervisor and they agreed to analyze its contents. A few days later, we learned the shocking truth. The can didn't contain formula milk. It was agricultural lime used in farming. Rick and my mom looked somber back at our house.
This lime was once used for marking lines in schools, but it was discontinued after causing blindness in some cases.
Blindness, you mean?
Just opening the can could have been dangerous for both you and the baby.
I shivered, imagining the worst. If I hadn't known and had opened it, Kevin might have been in grave danger. Anger boiled inside me against Elizabeth, who had stooped to harming even Kevin. I couldn't let her actions slide any longer. I decided to expose her misdeeds and seek justice. A few days after receiving the formula milk, Jason called to inform me that the police had shown up at their house. To explain the chaos unfolding to the confused Jason, I headed to my in-laws' house with my mother, holding Kevin. Upon arrival, we saw Elizabeth being restrained by the police, struggling and yelling.
I haven't done anything. Don't make up stories. I won't go with the police. Let me go.
Sarah, they're saying something about Elizabeth harming you. They're saying they're taking her to the police station.
Jason said that, looking bewildered as he alternated his gaze between his wife's commotion and us. Jason, what the police are saying is true. We were almost killed by her.
What? What do you mean?
I haven't done anything. Don't believe what that woman says.
Elizabeth screamed. However, Jason looked at her sternly.
If the police are involved, there must be a reason. Sarah, can you tell me what happened?
I explained everything to Jason, who had regained some composure. I think she intentionally put lime in the milk. You're into gardening, right? You must have bought lime in bulk.
Indeed. I bought lime for the garden. I was planning to spread it soon, but noticed it was less than I remembered. Could she have lied that it was formula milk and given it to Sarah?
Elizabeth turned pale under Jason's sharp gaze.
No, I wouldn't do such a thing.
Then you won't mind if the police check for fingerprints on the can, right? If they find someone else's fingerprints, that person is likely the culprit.
What do you mean?
She started sweating and looked away, nervous. You better confess now. If you keep making a fuss, it might turn into obstruction of justice. I said that firmly as she glared at me.
Yes, I put the lime in. It was just a little prank.
A little prank. You gave something that can cause blindness in adults, lying it was formula milk. That's way over the line.
You should have realized immediately it wasn't formula milk. I never thought you'd actually feed it to him. If you can't tell the difference, maybe you're unfit to be a mother.
She laughed mockingly. I was furious. Enough. It's one thing to harass me. But what if something happened to Kevin? If you disliked me that much, you should have opposed the marriage from the start.
I did oppose it. A daycare worker with no education or income. Rick's just being used, but Rick insisted on marrying you. He wouldn't listen.
I had to protect Rick because he's being deceived, she shouted, spitting with rage. She had been harassing me to break up our marriage, but it wasn't working. She seemed to panic, thinking that once we had a child, we definitely wouldn't divorce. So, she thought threatening harm to Kevin might make me initiate a divorce. But that doesn't give you the right to do anything you want. This is a serious crime.
A crime? Don't be so dramatic. It was just a prank.
It's more than just a prank.
Rick's voice came from behind. He had come home after hearing about the commotion. As soon as she saw Rick, Elizabeth reached out to him desperately.
Rick, help me, please. This woman is trying to get me arrested. It's all a misunderstanding. Convince the police. You know them, right?
I'm sorry, but it wasn't Sarah who pressed charges. It was me.
Why would you do that?
I feared for the lives of Sarah and our child.
Rick said that as he looked at her sadly.
When you gave Sarah the lime, she and her mother came to the police station where I was. I've heard all about the harassment.
That was just being a bit strict.
No more lies. I've heard about the lime. If Sarah had opened it while holding Kevin, the dust could have caused serious harm.
I honestly didn't know it was that dangerous. I thought it was harmless since it's used in gardens.
Not knowing isn't an excuse. There was no harm done, but you had malicious intent. That could be attempted murder.
Attempted murder.
She gasped, covering her mouth.
You've done enough. Reflect on your actions and pay for them.
Wait, I did it for you. Please, let's pretend this never happened. We're family. Overlook this much.
She clung to Rick with tears in her eyes. But he shook his head slowly.
If I forgive you now, you won't learn. When I told you about marrying Sarah, you judged her without even meeting her and wouldn't listen.
To make her reconsider her actions, Rick quietly explained why he had to press charges. But Elizabeth didn't seem convinced, apologizing while crying and clinging to Rick's feet.
Why are you so cold? Do you know how hard I've worked to raise you? Are you really taking the side of a woman you've only known for a few years over your own mother? That's too much.
I am grateful to you, Mom. You did a lot for me, like household chores and driving me to extracurricular activities. But the way you've treated Sarah is wrong. I won't withdraw the charges.
No, please, I've reflected on my actions. I won't harass Sarah anymore. I'll do anything, even help with the housework. Just forgive me.
Elizabeth began to cry uncontrollably. Still, Rick just watched her silently, without nodding. Then, realizing her appeals to Rick were futile, she turned to her husband.
Dad, please help me. I'm not guilty. Tell the police I'm innocent.
Jason quietly shook his head.
I've been silent until now, but what you did can't be forgiven. You need to pay for your crimes.
Why are you taking her side too? If I get arrested, I can't live here anymore. Didn't we say we'd enjoy our retirement here, gardening? Are you okay with losing that dream?
The neighbors, having heard the commotion, were watching from afar. If she were taken away now, rumors would surely spread. It could even become impossible for her to live there. But Jason remained unyielding.
It's okay if I can't garden anymore. If it means Sarah and Rick won't suffer, that's fine.
Enraged, Elizabeth shouted.
You're prioritizing her over your own wife. You prefer a younger woman. You no good traitor.
Exasperated by her foul language, Jason sighed.
I never thought you were this terrible. I can't stay with you anymore. We're getting divorced. Get arrested for all I care.
Are you serious? You're joking, right? We were fine until yesterday. Why are you suddenly talking about divorce?
Jason held his head.
Suddenly, watching you harass Sarah without remorse and insult others when things don't go your way cooled my love instantly.
But everyone's on Sarah's side. No one listens to me.
We are listening, and we're saying you're wrong. What you did is bad enough for arrest. How can you not understand that?
Shocked, she fell silent at his stern tone.
I don't want to spend my life with someone who lacks common sense.
Jason said that, causing Elizabeth to tremble violently.
Wait, if you leave me, what am I supposed to do? I have no income. My pension is not much. I won't be able to live. Please, just not divorce.
She stretched out her hands, pleading as if casting a spell to stop the divorce. However, Jason coldly brushed her hands away. Her face was then a mess with tears and smeared makeup. She then turned towards me.
Sarah, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I apologize. So please forgive me. If you forgive me, then Rick and Dad will too. Please forgive me.
That's not really an apology to me, is it? You're just apologizing to get forgiveness from Rick and your husband, right?
No, that's not true. I really do feel sorry. I'll do anything if it means getting forgiveness. You know, child rearing is hard, right? I can help you with that. It will make things easier for you.
She said this with a forced smile. It made me feel nauseous. How could I trust someone who endangered Kevin's life with such dangerous harassment to help with child rearing? I sighed, exasperated at her complete lack of understanding. I'm sorry, but I can no longer trust you. Therefore, I want nothing more to do with you.
Don't say that. Aren't we family?
Family? You never thought of me as family, did you? You've always been trying to divorce me and kick me out of the house.
Well, that's...
I might have tolerated the harassment against me, but I can't forgive someone who harasses Kevin. I can't consider you family anymore, and no matter how much you apologize, I can't forgive you. Rick then signaled the police. They grabbed Elizabeth's arm to take her to the patrol car.
No, stop. Don't touch me. Please, forgive me.
As she screamed, the police led her away. She was later arrested for attempted murder. We didn't suffer any health damage, but due to the severity of her actions and her malice, she faced serious punishment. Jason divorced her, and Rick also decided to cut ties with her. Now, she is in prison, and we have moved and cut off all means of communication to ensure she cannot contact us after her release. She had a history of harassment and wasn't well regarded in the neighborhood. Her arrest spread her bad reputation, and she lost any supporters she might have had. Even after her release, she likely lived a lonely life without friends or relatives to rely on. Being a housewife, she has no income. And with her age and criminal record, finding work will be difficult. It's sad to think about her situation, but for Kevin's safety, it was necessary. Kevin is now crawling and growing well. Watching him grow, I'm relieved we cut ties with Elizabeth. I'm committed to ensuring Kevin's health and safety going forward.
Mama, if you eat that, you'll die.
That's what my 9-year-old son, Michael, whispered to me as I stood in front of the cake my husband had bought for my birthday. Michael, always wise beyond his years, seemed to know something. As soon as my husband, John, stepped into the kitchen, Michael quietly switched our plates. 10 minutes later, John suddenly began to struggle, foaming at his mouth, and fell down. In a panic, I called an ambulance, and he was rushed to the hospital. Later, I would learn about the horrifying fact that had unfolded behind the scenes, shaking me with fear. I am Linda, 43 years old, a full-time employee in the food industry, living with my 45-year-old husband and 9-year-old son, Michael. I met John 10 years ago, got married, and the following year, we were blessed with Michael. From a young age, Michael was a mature and intelligent child, able to read simple words and even some complicated ones by age 3, and he loved reading instruction manuals. Now at the age of 9, he would thoroughly research any word or subject that puzzled him or caught his interest, and often making sharp observations that impressed me. On the other hand, John, while gentle and calm when we were dating, turned out to be quite domineering after marriage. He believed housework was a woman's job, saying that a wife should always walk 3 steps behind her husband, and he did not do any houseworks. He would constantly nitpick everything I did. This became apparent when I started working part-time after enrolling Michael in daycare.
Hey, the house is getting dirty. Are you slacking off on cleaning?
But it's tough since we're both working. Could you help out a little?
Housework is the wife's job. It's ridiculous for you to ask me for help. If you can handle it, I'll ask my mom to help.
He said, and without consulting me, he gave my mother-in-law, Susan, a key to our house. Susan, who lived nearby with my father-in-law, Bob, had always been eager to interfere in our life, which bothered me.
The housework isn't done at all, poor John.
She started coming into our house unless she was not invited, and always said something sarcastic. I shouldn't have asked my husband to share the houseworks. To make matters worse, my husband was delighted that Susan came to our house and joined her in criticizing me. I can manage the housework myself, so there's no need for you to come over. I declared, refusing her help, and ended up handling all the houseworks by myself. However, when she stopped coming, my husband began spending more time at his parents' house. Especially after Bob passed away, he visited there more often. When I was sick, I asked him at his parents' house to make dinner at least for Michael. He scolded me, saying his mother never made his father do anything when she was ill, and decided to stay at his parents' house for a week to avoid catching my cold. I endured his attitude, and Michael started elementary school. I had a bit more time, so I decided to switch to a full-time job. I felt insecure about my marriage and wanted to be financially independent in case of any uncertainties.
It's fine if you become a full-time employee, but don't slack off on housework.
John said predictably, offering no help at all. It seemed like he had complained to Susan again.
John is complaining that the housework isn't getting done, so I've decided to come over and help.
Thus, she started coming over again, repeated sarcastic comments every time she saw me. I was exhausted from this repetitive cycle. Seeing this, Michael started to talk to Susan whenever she began her nagging.
Grandma, do you know the 4 major elements of happiness?
What?
Then, what about the happiness hormones?
What are you talking about?
Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins. They are secreted from the pituitary gland in the brain. Let me explain in detail.
He would say. She couldn't interrupt him because he was her beloved grandson. Michael, displaying knowledge in science, history, math, and economics from sources I don't know, always exhausted Susan by the time she left. It was a day after Michael turned 9. John brought a cake for my birthday. Until then, John always bought expensive brand bags and clothes for Susan on her birthdays, but had never bought anything for me since our marriage. So I was surprised by this cake. He was extremely in a good mood, saying a soulless speech. Thank you for everything. I love you.
I chose your favorite tart for the birthday cake,
he said cheerfully while serving it. Michael, let's eat cake. After John came home, Michael quickly went to his room. When I knocked and opened the door, he was researching something on the old computer I had given him.
I'll be right there. Wait for me.
Then, as soon as he sat down, he whispered to me,
Mama, if you eat that, you'll die.
What? What do you mean?
I'll explain later. Just trust me for now.
He said firmly, looking into my eyes. I didn't understand, but it was the first time he was so insistent on his words.
Hey, what's wrong? Are you going to eat?
John urged me as I hesitated to touch the cake. I'd like to eat this cake with some coffee you make.
Okay. I'll make some now.
Surprisingly, John, who usually never listened to my requests, quickly went to the kitchen. Michael took this opportunity to switch John's plate and mine. When John came back with the coffee, he ate his piece of cake without any suspicion and kept urging us to eat. I cautiously took a bite of my cake. Watching us eat, John grinned and boasted, "I went all the way to a famous bakery to get this." However, about 10 minutes later, he suddenly started foaming at his mouth and fell down.
Mama, call an ambulance.
I was in panic, unable to understand what was happening, but Michael calmly made John spit out what was in his mouth. Trembling, I called for an ambulance. In an ambulance, John, in a clouded state of consciousness, kept muttering, "I put strong powder in the cake." He survived, but had to stay in the hospital for a few days for tests. Even after I returned home, his words about strong powder echoed in my ears.
Mama, I looked up strong powder on the internet earlier. It's dangerous to eat.
How did you know about it?
The seal on the cake box Dad brought was half peeled off.
Michael had become suspicious of John's behavior and saw him secretly throwing something in the trash. When John went to change clothes, Michael checked the trash and found a bag labeled strong powder.
That's why I looked it up online.
I vividly remembered Michael's whispered warning right before we ate the cake. But the doctors didn't mention anything about poison.
Yay, because I almost made him spit it all out. Strong powder doesn't become dangerous unless it exceeds a certain amount. Probably nothing will show up in the tests.
I realized that if Michael hadn't acted quickly, I would have eaten that cake. The thought sent chills down my spine. Could John really have tried to kill me by putting something in the cake? We need to go to the police right away.
I think we shouldn't.
Why not?
Because Dad's the one who collapsed. If we tell the police now, they might think you did it.
His words plunged me into darkness. His reasoning made sense, and I felt utterly hopeless.
Don't worry, Mama. I'll take care of it.
Then, Michael went into John's study, a place he was usually forbidden to enter, and started looking for something.
Surely Dad must have left something behind.
Knowing his father's meticulous nature and habit of always making notes in his planner. Soon enough, Michael showed me a planner he had found. Inside, it detailed the components and effects of strong powder. This can't be true. As we read on, a horrifying truth emerged. John had already used this method to harm someone before, and that person was Bob. The planner meticulously described how he gradually increased the dosage given to Bob daily, with a note on the day of his passing that read, 10 grams leads to death. Shockingly, Susan had been helping him. They were in on it together. Flipping through the pages, we found a plan for my birthday.
Are you okay, Mama?
Michael asked as I realized I was shaking with fear and anger. I can't forgive them for trying to take my life after Bob. This planner could be in evidence, right?
Unfortunately, it might not be. They could claim it's just a fantasy written down. Besides, Grandpa has already been cremated, so there's no way to investigate.
I see. Without evidence, there was no way to bring them to justice. As I looked down, feeling hopeless, Michael gripped my hand tightly.
I'll find the evidence and protect you, Mama. Let's catch them together.
His words gave me strength, and I nodded firmly, gripping his hand. I resolved to stand against them. If they are determined to harm us, I will face them. For Michael and myself, I will protect our lives. I will also avenge Bob. Thus, Michael and I began preparing for the decisive battle, vowing revenge against John and Susan. Following Michael's advice that Grandma probably hasn't given up yet, I started keeping an eye on her. While she visited John in the hospital every day, one day she headed to a busy downtown area, several stations away from the nearest station to her house. I followed her to a shady-looking shop off the main street, where she eventually emerged with something in hand. "Susan, what are you doing here?" I approached her on the main street, pretending to bump into her by chance. Startled, she turned around.
Linda, what are you doing here, not visiting John and enjoying shopping instead?
"Just some work stuff. But Michael is anxious about his dad's hospitalization and needs cheering up. Could you come to our house for a bit?" She was so sarcastic as usual, but I invited her home, which is something I normally wouldn't want to do, but today was necessary. As soon as we got home, Michael greeted her joyfully.
Grandma, I have something to show you. Come to my room.
He winked at me and pulled her forcefully into his room. In the meantime, I checked the contents of the bag she had brought from the shop. It contained a white powder, and I discreetly took a small amount and placed it in another bag. I took this somewhere on the next day. Several weeks later, on the day of John's discharge from the hospital, I told Susan to pick him up, saying I was preparing a celebration. In the meantime, Michael and I cooked a feast and welcomed them with a full table of dishes, along with a crucial setup: a container filled with a white powder resembling strong powder. As John and Susan entered the room, Michael guided them to the table.
Hey, I helped make this feast too. Eat a lot.
They soon started whispering to each other after sitting down.
Mom, isn't that?
Don't be ridiculous. It can't be here.
They looked pale, seeing the white powder on the table. Is the seasoning okay? I asked, but they kept their heads down, not touching the food. By the way, I heard sprinkling this on food makes you feel energized. I handed the white powder to Michael, saying, sprinkle this on for them.
Stop it. Don't put that unknown stuff in.
John, terrified, knocked the powder out of Michael's hand. What's wrong? I just want you and Grandma to live a long life, I said with my brightest smile, as Susan also shouted, stop it. Why? You wanted me to stay healthy too, right? That's why you put it on my cake, although you ended up eating it and got hospitalized. They looked horrified. I then presented them with some papers. I had our company's inspectors analyze this substance. Here are the results. It contains dangerous components that could be lethal in certain quantities. John's eyes darted around as he faced unexpected evidence.
I don't know anything about this.
But this is from what Susan had, right?
How dare you go through my things? And I only bought it because I was told it was a health supplement.
I confronted them with more evidence. Then what's this? 10 grams leads to the death, it says. This date is the day Bob was taken by ambulance, right? I placed a copy of John's planner on the table. After a moment of silence, John started to speak, defeated.
Dad was in the way. He didn't like how close Mom and I were, always meddling in everything we did.
Exactly. He was always getting between us and was so annoying. Couldn't stand him.
They probably resented Bob for worrying about his son's dependency on Susan and intervening. I was appalled by their selfish motives. Having succeeded once without getting caught, they now aim to send me to death too.
You're also an eyesore.
Right, you're in the way of me and my son.
That's no excuse to kill someone. What you did is a crime. I'm calling the police and submitting this evidence.
You think we'll let you do that?
Suddenly, John burned the documents with a lighter.
There's no evidence now. The police will just think it's a delusional story of a daughter-in-law's revenge.
As John smugly approached me, Michael coolly pointed out,
Dad, that's just a copy, and I've recorded our entire conversation on a voice recorder, which is more than enough evidence.
John turned pale and muttered, "No way," while Susan desperately said, "We were so close to getting rid of the nuisance."
Dad, I can't believe you'd attempt such a sloppy plan. No matter what you plan, it's bound to fail with me by Mom's side.
Michael said. He then laid out a meticulous plan, leaving them speechless. When I called the police, I advised Michael, "Your dad can never do as you plan since he has been a mama's boy who can't stand on his own. Don't be like me. Use your knowledge rightly."
Of course, Mom. Don't worry.
John and Susan, silent the whole time, finally spoke. "We don't need a husband or father like him in our lives."
Don't say that. We're sorry. Please don't call the police.
Yes, we apologize.
But it was too late for their sudden apologies. Reflect on your actions in jail. Goodbye. As the police arrived and took them away, they were crying and screaming. The copy of the planner and the voice recording served as evidence, leading to their arrest. The shop where Susan bought the poison was also investigated, and the owner was also arrested. Following a divorce from John, I claimed $20,000 each from him and Susan as compensation, forcing them to sell their house to pay it, with nowhere to return after prison. I left the house where Michael and I had lived.
Mom, you fulfill all 4 elements of happiness. You're bound to be happy. I guarantee it.
Is that so? But I'm happy because you've helped me and set me free. Smiling together, we were determined to live our lives to the fullest.